You're listening to Criticaleye's Inspiring Leaders podcast. Criticaleye is a global membership community with over 2 decades of experience supporting senior executives in their roles. We work with board-level executives, giving them opportunities to build their knowledge, skills, and access independent reference points outside of their immediate networks. Whether you're stepping up into a more senior role or aspiring to do so, looking to hone high-level stakeholder relationships, drive operational performance, build your own personal resilience as a leader, or have longer-term career goals such as moving into a plural career, Criticaleye's approach supports a range of leadership challenges and ambitions. Hello and welcome to the Criticaleye podcast. This episode is part of our Inspiring Leaders series, where we look at what it means to be a highly effective leader in today's climate and invite high-profile chairs, non-executives and executives on to share their views. My name is Julia Brook, Marketing and Communications Director at Criticaleye, and I'm pleased to be hosting our very first episode for 2026. Today I'm speaking to Criticaleye's own CEO, Matthew Blagg, and getting his observations on the trends and topics which our members were grappling with last year, as well as predictions and advice for executives on what they should be focusing on for the next 12 months. Matthew has many years of experience advising our members on strategy and leadership development. He is a well-respected sounding board for executives and leadership teams within Criticaleye's global community, having established a trusted reputation for sharing both honest and practical insights. I'm hopeful we'll get some of these today. A very warm welcome, Matthew, and first and foremost, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, Julia. Have you had a great Christmas?
Had a lovely break. Thank you
Wonderful.
very much. How about you? Did you manage to have a break?
Superb, great. And then I had New Year's up in Scotland, which was great fun.
Sounds amazing. Sounds wonderful. Well, obviously this podcast is our first for this year, so I think a good place, I suppose, to start, and I suppose hopefully our members will have had some time off over Christmas as well, and it's a great time to reflect. What do you think were the lessons learned in 2025? What kind of, I suppose, lessons will executives be taking into this new year in 2026?
I think that 25 was a complex year, wasn't it, with all the geopolitical shenanigans that went on and the sort of complexity of tariffs. And I think that in a lot of ways, strategically, it was a very uncertain year. Although I think actually if you then took the year as a whole, business performance wasn't too bad. And actually I think a lot of organisations in the end delivered perfectly good results. So if you stepped back at the end of the year and looked at your scorecard, I think actually most leaders were relatively happy. And I think that they felt that they had ridden through a complex environment and actually probably come out relatively unscathed.
We always have at the end of every calendar year a kind of economic summary type roundtable. It attracts a lot of interest from our members, and we obviously had one a couple of weeks ago, and I think there were a few things that stood out for me from that. Some were predicting that the UK economy would probably enter recession this year. Looking at UK and European markets, there was very much a lot of conversation around job markets contracting. The US, although not without its challenges, was benefiting from AI capital expenditure, and that was something that was noted on the call. And then looking across to Asia, where we obviously have a presence there, although China typically has higher productivity, higher growth, our members in that roundtable felt that China and the APAC region did have their own unique challenges around the property market, around a shrinking population, and it couldn't be relied upon to prop up global growth. So with all that kind of external pressures in play, how difficult do you think it will be for executives to make decisions in 2026?
So I think that complexity is something that great leaders thrive in. So all the things you've articulated are all of the complexities of the current landscape that we live in. I think that what that should mean is that great leadership is differentiated from poor leadership. So I think actually this is an extremely exciting environment. I think that it is complex. I think it is intense. I think leaders will have to be able to move at pace and will have to be balanced, delivering for today with performing for tomorrow. But within the context of a difficult environment, you've got more opportunity to create change than you would normally have. And I think that's the key for leaders. They have to harness that, they have to thrive on it, and they have to have the energy to deliver it. And I think that energy piece is massively important.
bearing in mind what you just said then, do you think that we're going to see a different type of leader in 2026? Because I suppose some of what I've just said, and bearing in mind the challenges we've had this year around pace and difficulties in geopolitics and the economy, it's a kind of continuation of challenge, isn't it? Do you think there's going to be different skills needed?
I don't think it's necessarily different skills, but I do think you've got to be really match fit. And I think you're seeing in Criticaleye succession happening faster. And there's a reason for that, because of the intensity and appetite to carry on dancing. I mean, it is a lonely role being a CEO. And I think within that sort of, you've got things coming at you from all different angles. And that intensity isn't necessarily easy to cope with. So I think leaders have to thrive in that. And I think if they're not thriving, I think then they have to get out of it. And I think that's in itself creates sort of opportunity and risk in organisations. But for me, this is a very binary environment. It's not easy. You've got to be really up for the fight and the battle. And you've got to love that.
Yeah.
If you don't love it, probably a good time to get out.
And are tenures getting shorter, do you think, on that basis?
Tenures are naturally getting shorter, and that will only accelerate for a number of different reasons. That I think that the intensity and demands are coming, and I think that the intensity levels are probably now the highest I've seen, because you've gone through a period where in some ways COVID sort of enabled a work-life balance in leadership that was rather unique.
You're seeing a change then?
You're seeing that work-life balance be very, very challenged. And so that sort of volume of virtual, which means you're available anywhere, anytime, and then in person, which is massively in demand, that means you're pulled even further. And then I think you've got your personal life that runs alongside that. And I think what I have seen is that the ability to balance your personal life with your business life is stretched quite badly at the moment. And I think there is a tendency or temptation for leaders to become sucked into their businesses. And I think that's a huge detriment to their overall balance. And for me, the most successful leaders are the ones who are able to balance both sides of the equation in terms of, yes, their organisational structure, but also their personal environment and life.
Yeah, thank you. That's really interesting. And you mentioned CEOs there, and obviously we work with quite a broad range of CEOs and leaders. CFOs and CPOs are other senior executives we work with quite extensively. Are you seeing similar things in terms of tenure, succession, work-life balance in those roles as well?
I think you've got a particularly interesting sort of mix at the moment, because you've got, in some ways, all three roles are extremely dialed up. CEO generally is under pressure because ultimately they make the big calls, and he or she has to get those right, and generally the data won't point to a decision. So CEOs have that pressure on them. If you take the CFO though, cash is king. You know, effectively performance is massively important. There's a lot of activist investors, whether that's in private equity or in the markets or government ownership. So, you know, that sort of capital elements under pressure. And then people and performance is a massive theme going through Criticaleye. There isn't an organisation we're working with which isn't looking to drive productivity and return on the people investment up. So if you take those three roles, you're talking about a real opportunity, but also a real dialed up agenda in those three areas.
I'd like to just move, I suppose, the conversation onto maybe thinking around the board, if that's okay. Non-executives in our community are very active, and we have a really extensive global group of board mentors who are all representative on many different boards across the world. But what do you see as some of the primary risks for boards at present? And also, after that, I'd like to get maybe you to comment a little bit on how boards are working with their executive teams and if that's going to change in 2026. My
gut feeling is you'll see more conflict around boards and between executives and the board itself. Why do I feel that is? Because in a heightened pressure environment, there's more tension. Also, there's a danger that boards either become too involved or not involved enough. And I think the balance of getting that right is going to be particularly tricky, because the implication of getting it wrong for a board is significant. So the tendency in that scenario is to get overly involved. The reality of that over-involvement you cross into executive lines, you can slow the pace down. So I think the pressure on chairs to get the balance right is going to be pretty extreme. And I had some really interesting things happening at the end of last year. There was a discussion I had recently about a CEO who felt they're being bullied by a non-executive and wanted representation in each meeting they have. And for me, that isn't an isolated scenario. It's an example of the heightened tension, the heightened pressure. I think then the demands are increased. Generally, when you've got heightened pressure and demands, tensions come. And when you have tensions, you have conflict. So I think you're going to see those components. And I think investors are going to want to see performance. So the complexity of those different things is going to mean you're going to need resilience around the board table.
Yeah.
I think you're going to need board members who have a competency to go beyond the reports. They will need to be more committed and in terms of time commitment. And I think that then they'll be challenged in terms of the rewards that they're receiving. So I think there is a number of different things that are going on there.
I suppose it's interesting because in Criticaleye we talk about that growing regulatory pressure on boards all the time, but you just said about them also being more, I suppose, what was it you said, kind of more active in decision making, more involved, more time on their part as a non-executives, that change the role further, that they have to be more involved in that and maybe sit on less boards and have more time commitment to each board?
I think there's always a divergence of opinion around the balance of having too much and too little. I think overboarding has always been a thing, but I think underboarding is also a thing. So generally, if you look at the capable board members, they are still active, not only in the board roles they have, but also in their wider engagement. And I think that's really important because you need different reference points than the reports. And I worry with anyone at an executive or non-executive level who doesn't have curiosity and isn't connected into wide ecosystems that give them different reference points. Because in my mind, change doesn't happen in the data sets. It happens with you having feelers outside of that. And the best board members are those that have that wider connectivity.
Thank you. And so we've talked about the board, you talked about investors as well. In terms of other stakeholder groups, do you see any others kind of coming to the fore in 2026? Customers, are they going to be more active, or what kind of stakeholder challenges do you think executive teams are going to have?
I think it's probably easier, Julie, to say which stakeholder won't be dialed up, because I think you're going to have them all. I mean, we know that there's pressure on consumers. It doesn't matter whether you're B2B or B2C. You have to be really close to your customer. You have to align with them. Margins under threat. So at the end of the day, customers have choice.
Yeah. So
you've really got to be aligned with them. You've then got the local government and national governments, the complexity around that, the expectations. You've got your shareholders, whatever format that takes. You've got your people and the sort of complexity of their lives in a world with still inflation sparkling around the world. That puts real pressure on. So I think that the point around it is it's difficult to see where you haven't got difficult challenges. And I think within that, the real danger is that CEOs become lonely and isolated. And when that is moving out and quiet. And I always think that you have to be very careful when CEOs are quiet. Because CEOs have to be able to take things on and stand for things. But that can be very difficult when everyone has such strong views around you.
Thank you. You recently obviously came back spending some time in Asia with our Asian members, and it'd just be interesting to know if you saw any specifically unique challenges when talking to executives and non-executives out in, well, you were in Singapore, weren't you? And our members come from all over the region there. What kind of things were they telling you over in Singapore?
My instinct is that the complexity in Asia is potentially getting quite interesting, and what I mean by that, in a lot of ways, Asian markets continued to have a higher growth than some of the other regions of the world, and you can argue it's still there. But I think the inflection point of technology on that now is accelerating even faster, and I think leaders are struggling to cope with that challenge, because in some ways, when you've got a higher growth rate, you don't have to change yourself as much, and so I think what you are going to see in some ways, I think top leadership in the Asian region has got a real challenging sort of mix to sort of create change and opportunity. And what you are seeing accelerate is private capital flowing into the Asian marketplace. And I think you'll see that continually grow. Now that's going to put more pressure on some of the more established organisations in the region. So I think on a positive, leaders are going to have to move faster, decisions are going to have to be quicker, and that's going to make it more dynamic. And I think that's a real opportunity in the region.
More dynamic, but maybe harder for leaders, and that goes back to that resilience piece and having a network or having some kind of external reference points to tap into when you need them, I suppose.
Well, I think culturally, in certain ways, challenge can be one of the challenges in an Asian environment. And so that element about actually having disruptive discussions can be quite difficult. And I think actually that's beginning to become more established. And as you've got the acceleration on that, I think there's the opportunity in that. Again, the traditional leadership styles are under more threat, hierarchical environments are under threat, and actually there's real opportunity if that can be unleashed or unlocked. But ultimately, if you're hiding within it, that's going to be quite difficult.
Okay. We've obviously talked a bit about leadership resilience and the challenges to that, and that's I suppose apparent to everyone in terms of the pace of change and everything that's going on. But be interesting to just know what leadership traits, aside from resilience, you think are going to be important this year. Yeah, that's the question really. What leadership traits you think are going to kind of come to the fore? I
think that the most important piece for leadership at the moment is their communication, their capability to communicate clearly and consistently, and the consistency is really important. I think they've got to be capable of articulating difficult things and taking people with them on a journey. And so that element of even when there isn't answers, being able to articulate the landscape that you're in and how it's shifting and how you can take advantage of that shift is really important. And generally that flips to the second bit. Great leaders really understand risk. And again, the more you understand risk, the more you can drive opportunity. So for me, there's sort of real competencies that you want at the moment. You need to be a really strong understanding of risk. And on the back of that, you need to be very clear in your communication and make sure that communication drives through the organisation.
Do you think we'll see more executives stepping down as the pace of change becomes even more relentless this year? Do you think we'll see tenures getting even shorter? We've already kind of talked about that a little bit, but we'll see some CEOs who don't make it this year because of that?
You will see more rotation of CEO for multiple reasons. One is that there's a number of them who financially don't need the role anymore, and actually with all the complexities, it's not the right place for them to be. So you'll see that naturally happening. And they've got more opportunity from that width. You've then got the reality of performance. There will be a number of CEOs who sadly will be removed because of performance. So you've got that. And then you've got consolidation. And so there will continue to be consolidation, because what you are going to see is you're going to see scrunching together of businesses taking out synergistic value to drive margin. So again, there's a number of moving parts that means there is going to be more pressure on those senior leaders.
Interesting comment you just made, because that kind of leads into my next question around, and obviously our members don't think of things just in terms of 1 year, do they? They're kind of looking at much longer term plans and growth and strategies. So what do you think senior executives and boards should be doing to future-proof their business this year? How can they ensure they're getting the right expertise and inputs on what's coming around the corner so they can prepare?
Well, I think great leaders and leadership teams have that naturally because they create space. And I think there is a real danger that you become very operational and tactical in the environment that you're in without all of the complexity going on and moving on. And I think that great leaders are able to push more down and create a structure that empowers underneath them. And I think that is hugely important. I think that with all of the complex pressure points, it's so easy for leaders to get sucked into being visible the whole time and answering every single question. So that balance is just really important. I think you have to be able to discuss complex strategic things and come together and share and reflect on that. And if you take boards, I think the better boards have regular strategy sessions where there are more free-flowing discussions.
Yeah.
And again, they bring in resources that challenge them from different angles. And again, if you take sort of any element, I think it's really important that you have different ability to stimulate different thinking. Some of that's by having different people represented on the board, and others bringing different specialists into environments to stimulate that discussion. So it's a bit like why our pop-up boards are so powerful, Julia, because that ability to critique and benchmark a plan independently is just extremely powerful.
Yeah, funny, you've actually kind of always answered my next question again as well, because thinking about, I suppose, Criticaleye and the work we do with executives, the next question I had was, what do you think our members are going to be looking for from us most this year? We obviously offer quite a broad range of different things to executives, from mentoring, the pop-up boards you just mentioned, access to different experts, different executives who can share stories. How are our members going to be tapping into it?
I think the biggest thing for us as a community is that we have to understand our customers, and our customers are under real-time pressure. So the need massively dialed up. That there isn't a CEO who can answer the crystal ball question of where the world ends up. So they need to evolve, need to change, they need to have reference points, need to be able to share with peers. Absolutely massive demand. The space of time that you have to have that in is the real challenge. So that service component and us running alongside people, creating the right links at the right point, working on a forward agenda anywhere in the world, is just absolutely critical. Mm-hmm. Because without that, I think that you do become in a narrow bowl very fast. And sometimes it's uncomfortable pulling yourself out of that, but you absolutely need it. So if you look at our members, that ability to reference, benchmark and think as you're running through a very complex landscape, it is so important.
Thank you, Matt. I think we've kind of coming slightly to the end of our time, and in the kind of usual tradition of these podcasts, we usually ask our guests to leave us with a final parting piece of advice. And so I wondered whether you would leave our listeners with something they can do to set themselves up for a successful 2026. What would be your advice, maybe from a personal and also a Criticaleye perspective?
I always think, I personally love January. I think it's the beginning of the year. I think it's full of opportunity.
Yeah.
I think that energy is so important. I think for anything you can do to ensure that you retain the energy over the year and create an environment which gives your brain the chance to decompress and as such drive energy into the organisation, and that's the most important thing for you.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing those insights with our listeners. And thank you obviously to our listeners as always. All of Criticaleye's podcasts can be found on Podbean, Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Also our website, www.criticaleye.com. Also visit our website for more on how we support leaders and our tailored programmes for senior executives and the work that we do with different teams. So look out for more episodes from Criticaleye soon. And in the meantime, thank you, Matthew, and hope to have you back soon.
Thank you, Julia. Take care.
Thanks.